Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. So it is that time once again to analyze the upcoming patch coming soon to League of Legends. For this patch there's actually going to be a surprisingly large amount of buffs because, well, usually for the past few patches there's been quite a bit of nerfs instead. But regardless, there's a lot of information to cover and go over, so as usual, if you end up enjoying this type of video and you want me to continue doing this for every other patch coming up, then let me know by simply pressing that like button. But let us not waste any more time and get right into the big changes that you need to know about. So now the very first thing I want to talk about isn't actually very specific to what's coming to the next patch, but it was revealed, or I guess somewhat leaked, during this PBE patch cycle. And that is going to be the leak of Urgot's Rework. Now there's not a whole lot of information, in fact there's pretty much just this one screenshot more or less, but it is showing off Urgot in this sort of rainbow format, showing off his character format and his model and all that stuff, and giving us a rough idea on what we can expect and what he's going to be looking like, but again, there's really no other information. But what this does tell us obviously is the fact that Urgot's rework is definitely on its way. Now Riot has been reworking a lot of the older champions, Galio, Warwick, Poppy, and Urgot seems to be the next one on the list. So this is definitely something you want to start looking forward to. But now let's talk about the actual first big change coming to the next patch, and that's going to be the Galio rework. So I've already made a couple of gameplay videos and I'm sure you guys have seen other people's gameplay videos of the champion as well, but he's finally going to be released to the live servers in just a few days. So I'll give you my very quick rundown on what I personally think of the champion thus far. Now I do want to quickly mention I haven't played the Galio rework ever since the huge changes happened to him not too long ago, where they kind of completely swapped the way his overall tankiness works, just removed pretty much every single armor scaling, and just made him much less of a tanky type champion and more of someone that's focused on building MR and AP. But regardless, this is what I currently think of Galio. Personally, I think his passive is quite good, giving you solid AoE control and wave clear, giving you nice trade potential in laning phase, and it synergizes with his E and Q ability quite decently as well. His Q ability is without question his bread and butter. You spam this thing left and right, it does a lot of damage. Whenever the tornadoes meet, it does a decent amount of damage as well, which scales because it does percent HP damage. Overall, definitely a very solid ability. His W Shield of Duran has definitely been nerfed, but for the most part, it still serves its purpose. Essentially, it's Galio's ultimate and now a regular ability. You cast it, you hold it down, and you essentially have this big AoE area when, upon release, you'll taunt everyone within it. It'll also give Galio some damage reduction overall as well, which now only scales off of MR, but regardless, it's still pretty good. This is going to be your main setup ability where you just essentially get everything going, you get the party started, and then you synergize it with every other ability. Following this, his E ability is going to be your main way to actually engage when you're not relying on your ultimate because it's your only actual dash ability. Essentially, you just dash into a target area, hit people down, and knock them and stun them and whatnot, deals good damage, synergizes with the passive, and it overall works very well with his skits. So when you combine this with his ultimate, which is also a very cool ability, which essentially is a defensive Pantheon ultimate, pretty much think of it this way: if Pantheon ultimate and Shen ultimate were to be combined, Galio's ultimate is the result. Use it on an allied target, they also get this damage reduction bonus that your W offers you as well, and then you go in, do a huge AoE knockup, and it sets up the rest of your kit beautifully because the second they're knocked up, you can E on top of them, it'll stun them as well, pop the W, taunts them, the Q damage will consistently be in there with your passive as well, and it's good damage, you're in the middle of the fight, you're a huge disruptor, and you can zone very, very well. All in all, a pretty damn good champion, has great tank potential, good zoning as well, has decent damage in his kit, but I feel like he is somewhat comp reliant, where if you have a team that's very defensive and all the way in the back, it's going to be kind of difficult to make use of your ultimate properly. But now that we got Galio out of the way, the next thing I want to talk about is actually the summoner spell teleport. They have made very slight adjustments to the summoner spell, but very good ones as well, where essentially it's just a lot more kind of noob friendly or just easier to use. I mean, have you ever had those team fights where just a huge fight erupts, there's a whole lot of stuff going on, and you can't really have a good vision of maybe where the ward is that you should be teleporting to or things like that, and it can be a little bit awkward, and because of that, well, you come into the fight as the top laner, maybe as the mid laner, a little bit too late, and that was actually the difference between losing and winning. Well, now luckily for you, you can actually just use a teleport on the ground somewhere, and it will automatically find a nearby valid teleport target, so in this case maybe like a ward or a minion, and it will teleport to that for you automatically, rather than you having to find it and maybe even try to click on it, and just having a lot of these unnecessary issues. So again, not the biggest change in the entire world, but it will make the summoner's spell just a lot better and easier to use without having unnecessary complaints or complexities. So all in all, definitely a very welcome change. Following this, we also have some more buffs happening to Aatrox. Now, ever since his rework, I mean, he's still been quite underwhelming. He hasn't really lived up to the expectations everyone thought he would be. Riot seems to agree, and they're still trying to focus on making him better and put him in the point where he's actually a legitimate champion rather than more or less a troll pick. And here's how they decided to do that. First of all, they changed the effect from his passive from Blood Rush to Hellbent. Not very useful, nor does it really matter, but I thought I'd mention it regardless. But the part that really matters is the fact that now, whenever Aatrox exits his passive Revive, his Blood Well will now fill to 100% and his Blood Price or Thirst, the stacks on it that you have as you activated your passive Revive, will not be reset. So this overall just makes him a bit more consistent in how often he can be within his passive state, because it's really important. His whole kit essentially just revives upon him proccing this now called Hellbent passive to give him these bonus effects. But prior to this, whenever his passive would proc, where he would actually have the Undying passive where he would revive, he would be put into a state where he's instantly just a lot weaker, but now he'll still be just as strong and ready to go and ready to fight, which is going to be definitely a very good thing to have for the champion. But is it enough to put him back, or at least bring him to, where they really want him to be and be a kind of more or less a good champion? Maybe not so much, but again, there's only one way to find out, and that's to wait until it hits the live servers and test it out and see how it feels. Next up, we also have some buffs happening to Cho'Gath's R ability, where now at rank 2 and 3, it'll give you more HP per stack, and the total stacks able to be gained from minions and non-epic monsters has been increased from 5 to 6. Now, having said that, I still don't feel like this is going to be anywhere near enough to put Cho'Gath back into the meta ever since his so-called rework. His kit honestly is the main problem. It's just outdated, and it's hard to make it work and be viable in the current meta. So, having these slight so-called buffs for Cho'Gath and his ultimate, it's not really going to change a whole lot. His kit overall is the problem, and that's where Riot is going to have to look at if they want to put Cho'Gath back into the meta whatsoever. But following this, there's definitely a very welcomed Fiddlesticks buff, the first of which being to his Q ability, where the range has been increased by 50, which I think is actually quite damn good, and it's a lot better than most people probably think it is, because again, a lot of people will get caught off guard by just a simple range increase and how far he's now suddenly fearing you from. But the other buff happening to him, which potentially is even better, is to his W, where now it has a new effect, where it now returns the cooldown equal to its remaining duration if the target dies. So this will definitely make jungle Fiddlesticks seem much more viable, because now you don't have to sit there awkwardly spamming your auto attack, which essentially does negative damage on the jungle monsters, because your W just killed its target, but you still have about 4 seconds left on its remaining CD. So now it'll instantly give you back that CD for whatever remaining duration you had on your drain overall, and you'll be good to go, instantly draining every single monster, having great sustain in the jungle, and just overall clearing it that much faster. So there's a pretty good chance you'll start to see more Fiddlesticks jungles as this patch finally does roll out. Next up on the block, we also have some buffs happening to Gnar, another champion in the top lane that used to be the best by far, but now is considered to be one of the worst. This change is not going to really do a whole lot, but it's still a buff regardless. Essentially, the sustain he has now with his HP in the laning phase and Mini Gnar has been increased, while Mega Gnar has been slightly decreased, but overall, according to Riot, there should be a buff to his laning phase. He'll just be more consistent throughout it and just have better sustain overall. Again, not the biggest buff ever, but this will slowly shift the spotlight back onto Gnar, and maybe, just maybe, this will slowly also put him back into the meta. Following this, there's also yet another buff happening, this time to Misfortune. So ever since Riot absolutely gutted her Q ability, especially in the laning phase last patch, while they're trying to sort of make it a little bit better and essentially put a bandage on it. Now, I did talk about this in my previous video, but I'll quickly mention it again. Double up her Q. The damage has been increased from 80 to 100 by rank 5, and the total AD ratio has been increased by 15% as well. Keep in mind that these numbers right here apply to both of the Qs, the initial one and the second shot as well, so overall a pretty damn good buff to Misfortune. Is it going to be as good as it used to be? Probably not. But at least it's still a buff regardless, and now maybe she'll actually be played rather than being completely dropped and forgotten like she currently is. Now, there are also some changes happening to Quinn, where they're swapping her playstyle. It seems to be not as bursty, but played more as an actual marksman. Because her W now gives her a shit ton more attack speed, essentially double than what it used to by rank 5, but her Sky Strike, her R ability, the total AD ratio has been lowered by more than half. So again, this only tells me that they want her to be played more as kind of, still have the initial bit of burst to go in, but then transition into an actual traditional marksman playstyle, rather than just be 100% focused on the burst. Not really sure why they do this and kind of change the overall thematic playstyle of the champion, but again, only one way to find out, and that's to wait till it hits the live service and see how it affects her. Next up, there's actually a nerf happening to Varus once again. This one is going to be to his Q ability, where it's quite simple. The cooldown reduction that Varus now has within his kit overall that he gains from items will no longer be affected by the reduction if detonating blight stacks from at least one enemy champion with how his new Q ability now works. This will even further affect his poke potential with his Q ability and make it even less effective, but not by a whole lot worse than it currently is. Following this, there's also a change happening to Warlord's Bloodlust, where I did talk about in my previous video, but essentially they're changing the effect to not be 1 to 50% lifesteal, but instead heal for 5 to 40% of your total attack damage, amplified by critical strikes. Now it seems the intent behind this is to make it a bit more consistent, because at the moment when it says lifesteal, whenever you're attacking a champion with a lot of armor, you're not really getting a whole lot of lifesteal back, but whenever you're attacking minions, you're getting quite a bit back instead. But now having it work off of your total attack damage instead will make it different and will make it just kind of more consistent in how much lifesteal it'll give you back across the board, regardless of what exactly you're attacking. This is how I'm personally understanding it. Now I could be wrong in what I'm understanding about this ability and the change overall to this keystone, so you guys can let me know down below if I'm mistaken, but regardless, I feel like they're trying to make it overall a more consistent keystone throughout the whole game. The second last thing I want to quickly mention is actually a nerf to the red buff monster, the thing that gives you it whenever you kill it, the red brambleback. Its magic resistance has overall been lowered. Now this could be an indirect buff of course also to Fiddlesticks, who I'm also expecting to be much more popular this patch, on top of other potential junglers like maybe Elise or maybe even Rumble in the jungle or things like that. So you might want to definitely watch out for those AP junglers slowly sneaking their way back in, especially Fiddlesticks. But last but not least, I also want to very quickly mention that there are going to be new skins coming out, and these ones are going to be the April Fool skins. The best one by far is going to be Pugma, where Kog'Maw has been pretty much completely transformed to look exactly like a pug. This skin is definitely something special, and I feel like every single Kog'Maw player is going to be buying this one because it is it's definitely interesting. So I quickly just wanted to mention this skin because it is damn special. But regardless guys, that is about it for this video. There you have it, a lot of changes, especially a lot of buffs coming this patch. Fiddlesticks is my champion to watch out for, definitely without question. Other AP junglers as well. The Urgot Rework without question is something you want to watch out for as well, and potentially even Misfortune. But either way guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, check out my other videos as well. But I hope to see you for the next one. Peace.